All right, let's talk about one of vSphere's most powerful and maybe a little misunderstood automation tools, VMware Auto Deploy. We're going to break down exactly what it is, how it actually works, and why it is such a game changer for anyone managing servers at scale. So yeah, let's dive right in.
So picture this. Your boss comes over and says, hey, we need 100 new ESXi hosts online, like by the end of the week. Now, just imagine for a second walking into that data center with a stack of USB drives. The very idea of installing and configuring every single one of those by hand is enough to make any IT pro break out in a cold sweat.
Because, let's be honest, that manual process is a total nightmare. It's not just boring and repetitive, it's incredibly slow. And think about it, every single manual step, every click, every command you type, that's an opportunity for a tiny mistake, a typo in an IP address, a forgotten setting, any of which can cause massive headaches later on. There has to be a better way, right?
And of course there is. This is where VMware Auto Deploy comes into the picture. It is the solution to that manual nightmare we were just talking about. The best way to think of it is as this automated provisioning engine that just takes that entire painful process of setting up a new server and puts the whole thing on autopilot.
So what is it, really? Well, at its core, Auto Deploy is a vSphere feature that completely automates the installation and setup of your ESXi hosts, and it does it over the network. Now that's the key part. It uses the network to boot up a server and tell it exactly what it's supposed to be and what it should be doing, all without you ever having to physically touch it.
To really get a feel for this, let's follow a brand new server on its very first day. We can call it the automated journey. It's kind of the story of how a completely blank piece of hardware becomes a fully functional contributing member of your vSphere cluster. And it all happens in just a matter of minutes.
But before we start that journey, let's meet the key players that make all this work. First, you've got the Auto Deploy server. That's the brains of the whole operation. Then there's the rules engine, which kind of acts like a traffic cop, directing everything. You have image profiles, which contain the actual ESXi software, and host profiles, which define all the specific settings, like networking and security. And finally, answer files, which aren't always used, but can fill in any user-specific details during the setup. These are the core pieces that make the magic happen.
Okay, so let's see it in action. A new server powers on and does a PXE boot. It's basically just shouting out onto the network, hey, I'm here, what do I do? DHCP answers back, gives it an IP address, and points it toward the Auto Deploy server. From there, the server downloads its ESXi image. The rules engine kicks in and assigns it the correct image and host profiles. Then, it boots that software directly into its memory, applies all the configurations from the profile, and finally, it connects itself to vCenter, all ready to go to work. I mean, it's a completely hands-off deployment. It's brilliant.
But Auto Deploy isn't a one-trick pony. You actually have choices in how your hosts behave after that first boot. You can pick between a stateless or a stateful deployment, and honestly, each one has its own set of advantages.
So let's break down these options. In pure stateless mode, the host has zero local storage. It gets its entire identity from the network every single time it boots. This is absolutely perfect for maximum standardization. Then you have stateless caching, which is kind of a hybrid. It caches the image to a local disk after that first boot, which makes all the reboots after that way faster. And finally, there's stateful install. This uses the network boot just once to do a traditional installation onto the local disk, so you get all the automation up front, but with the feel of a classic setup.
Okay, so we've seen the what and the how, but let's talk about the why. Why go through the trouble of setting all this up? This brings us right back to that problem we started with, and it really highlights the huge wins you get from this kind of automation.
Because it is all about scale. We're not talking about deploying one or two servers here. We are talking about deploying hundreds of hosts, all of them provisioned identically, all of them configured perfectly, and all of them brought online in just a tiny fraction of the time it would take to do by hand.
And that kind of scale brings some incredible benefits. You get this ironclad standardization, which means every host is a perfect clone of every other host. That alone eliminates those weird, hard-to-diagnose problems. And by taking human hands out of the equation, you drastically reduce errors. And updates? Oh man, updates become almost trivial. You just update the image profile, reboot the hosts, and your entire fleet is running the new version. It's that simple.
When you boil it all down, this is the transformation that Auto Deploy offers. It takes what was once this tedious, error-prone manual chore and turns it into a fast, reliable, and totally standardized automated process. It's a fundamental shift in how we can manage infrastructure.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When your server's entire identity, its software, its configuration, its whole personality is just defined by a profile, what does that mean for the future of the data center? When your hardware becomes a truly blank slate, just waiting for instructions, what new possibilities does that unlock? It's something to think about.